Every 6 months or so, MINDERA shares an insights pack and insights talk around what we're seeing happening in the retail industry. So this is our Winter 25 update, and there's quite a lot of different themes around how technology is influencing retailers and e-commerce businesses. As you would imagine, one of the key themes is around AI and businesses' adoption of AI. So within this deck, we talk a little bit about macroeconomic trends, we talk about some of the other technology trends that we see, like self-service, loyalty. One of the big themes is how businesses are using AI throughout every department in the business, whether that's a retailer, e-commerce business, or a business that's doing a bit of both, and how they're using AI to influence customer experience, save costs, improve efficiency, and how that relates to the tough macroeconomic climate that businesses have faced over the previous sort of couple of years, really. So we're going to go through what we're seeing, what's working well, and in particular some of the watch outs, so ways we see businesses try something and it doesn't work, particularly with AI, and other ways where we see actually get a lot of success from implementing AI into a certain part of the business. So this talk is going to share some of those insights. What I'm going to do is talk about macro trends, so macroeconomic and other trends we're seeing in the industry, then a little bit on like general tech that retailers are implementing that's quite interesting, and probably quite a lot of time is going to be spent on how we're using AI in different parts of retail and e-commerce, because I think that is certainly the in vogue topic at the moment. So macroeconomic climate, when you look at data for retail, actually most countries, so well over half, are seeing slight growth in retail now across the world, which is pretty positive. Green is still growing, yellow is flat, red is in decline. These are the major countries that we've got data for. And actually for a lot of them that's modest growth, so it's not like a rapid turnaround, it's sort of a slow, gentle uptick we're seeing. And for most of them it's not changing very much either, so it's kind of plus or minus 2.5% in lots of areas. So that's the sort of the global picture that we see at the moment, which is sort of green shoots, albeit not necessarily a reason to celebrate. And UK is kind of similar, right? So this is the UK data from the Office of National Statistics. Retail sales, obviously you've got like post-COVID boost, then you've got a bit of up and down, and then you've got this massive period of 28 months decline, which sort of ended in the middle of last year, and things have been sort of broadly flat, if slightly growing, from a retail perspective in the UK. If you cut that up into different categories, so there's data on clothing and footwear, household and homeware, and food, and some other bits like fuel, which I've taken out. It's quite interesting to see the difference there between like clothing and fashion, and then the household goods, which obviously declined massively, sort of in that post-COVID world versus homeware. Then it's sort of normalised. Then you get this big period of like flat and decline, and more recently we've seen some kind of green shoots of growth there from both clothing and household. But clearly this is like 1s and 2%. This isn't like a massive turnaround. So macroeconomically better than it's been for a while, but certainly not the end of all challenges. When you look at then different data like UK store closures, I was quite surprised by this, because I sort of would have thought COVID or the 2009 financial crash would have seen more stores closing, but actually last year saw the most stores closing in this period in terms of like physical number of stores. The most businesses that failed in this period was the year before, and again you can sort of see businesses fail, they close their stores next year after the Christmas trading period is over. So that's the that data, and obviously the most people were affected were during COVID. 2025, which we only got sort of half the data for, it's looking a bit better than last year, but it's still by no means perfect. But I think we're seeing sort of some signs of recovery there from a retail perspective. Then when you look at online sales, internet sales as a percentage of retail is pretty flat. Obviously you've got the kind of post-COVID and COVID spikes there, and now you've got a sort of flat period. But overall, I think it is still slightly trending up over a sort of 15-year period there at the bottom. Probably not super surprising to people. One of the other big shifts, so I guess those previous ones are looking very much at sort of retail up or down, but actually one of the things that affects a lot of businesses more than we probably talk about are shifts within the market. So people losing market share, people gaining market share. And one of the trends we see obviously is a growth in resale, so second-hand products, and you see that with the growth of sites like Vinted, for instance, doing very well. And there's a real skew towards younger people buying second-hand much more. You can literally take all the different generations from like boomers to Gen Z, and the line just goes up in terms of these guys are buying more second-hand goods than the older generation. But overall, as a total picture, much more resale than there has been just 5 years ago. Rental was a bit of a fad in 2020. That's probably not surprisingly died out because the economics of it are really challenging, right? So sending stuff, getting it back, cleaning it, sending it to the next customer, and then all of a sudden it's out of season, so you've got to make so much money before that product goes out, so it just doesn't really work. So that's an unsurprising one, but retailers picked up that stuff really quickly. So that was quite interesting. And then obviously the other dimension is competition, so competition from other businesses. I really hate talking about Shein and Temu because everyone wants to talk about them, but you sort of have to really. Shein very fashion focused, Temu sort of a bit fashion and homeware focused. These guys are growing massively in the UK, like 20, 30, 40, 50% growth on already very big numbers. This is their sort of total business. And unsurprisingly, in a world where retail is growing 1 or 2%, if a business is growing 40, 50% and it's taking market share from other people, we see that in the industry quite heavily. So a lot of retailers are facing pressure from businesses like that. So ASOS, their valuation's gone from 5 billion to 320 million. And then that pretty much is largely down to the likes of Shein taking their customers. And this is data that's not necessarily accurate because you don't have actual data for it, but reported historical data. This is predicted data. Now, I'd be interested to see whether this pans out or not, because actually the trend of their growth was slowing, and so each year had less growth as a percentage than the previous years. This year it's predicted to go through the roof. It'd be interesting to see whether that happens or not, and they get this resurgence. And Temu obviously is a newer entrant to the market in more broader categories, but doing a very similar thing essentially. Then probably the final macroeconomic dimension is cybersecurity. The data from the National Cyber and Security Centre shows that it's more than doubled in terms of the number of successful attacks on businesses, and particularly focusing large businesses, and particularly in this higher severity category. They've actually introduced a new level, 3 high, to kind of differentiate between the older attacks and the newer attacks. You've got Jaguar Land Rover, which is the costliest cyber attack in UK history, which happened this year, and actually of that sort of 2 billion cost, only half of it is Jaguar Land Rover's cost. The other half of it is all the suppliers of Jaguar Land Rover who have got Jaguar Land Rover parts that no one can do anything with. They can't sell them on. Jaguar Land Rover aren't going to take them, and those orders for the cars that they were due for have been cancelled. So really, really big impact from a cyber and security perspective. And I think if we look to the year ahead, unfortunately, of these 204 retailers that have been hacked, quite a lot of them will have paid quite large ransoms to people. I'd like to think that it's not many, but I think the reality is there is quite a lot of ransoms being paid. And you can kind of tell that because they won't say that they haven't paid a ransom. So if you're not paying a ransom, you say, I'm not paying a ransom. If you don't say anything, you're probably paying a ransom. And all that will do is embolden attackers to attack more businesses, essentially. So I think we'll see that get worse for the foreseeable future because there's been so many successful attacks, right? People who do hacks, yes, they're financially motivated, but they're also motivated by the credibility, the esteem, the sort of bragging rights that ends up in headlines. There's been lots of headlines, so that'll just spur more people on to do that kind of thing. So that's the macroeconomic climate. So in terms of like retailers' response to these kind of climates, we see people trying to drive down costs and improve unit economics. And when you look at a retail business, there's kind of 5 big categories of cost, and there's some other costs as well, but the products that you either buy or make, that's a huge cost. Property is a big cost, your stores, your warehouse, then you've got people, which is a huge cost, or you employ. Marketing often represents 20, 30% of a business's spend, and then you've got technology, which perhaps is a bit smaller, but still can be quite significant, particularly if you're an e-commerce business. And what we're seeing is retailers respond in many ways. So AI is throughout all of these, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But one big trend we're seeing, which again I'll talk about, is things like marketplace and dropships. And lots of businesses are saying, actually, we don't want the cost burden of making stock or designing stock. Because if we design it, someone's just going to steal it and knock it off tomorrow from China, which is obviously one of the big challenges we have in the industry at the moment. So they're using things like marketplace and technology to try and support their existing businesses. In terms of property, a big trend that again I'll spend a little bit of time on later is retail media. So a lot of people realise that actually their store and physical space can be sold from a retail media perspective. So we're seeing a rise in-store screens to sell advertising essentially, and there's some quite clever technology about that. As well as omnichannel, so people realising actually we can get our online people to go to our stores, we can sort of create this cycle, which has been going on for a while now, but we're seeing people get more creative with omnichannel. And then the other big one is self-service. So you'll go into a supermarket now and you'll see that there's 5 self-service tills where there were 1 or 2 staff tills, because again, you can get more in, save time, save money. On the people front, AI we'll talk about. Self-service I've kind of mentioned there. You can have one member of staff manning 10 self-service tills rather than a 1-to-1 staff till ratio. So we're seeing a big drive for that, and it's now moving out of grocery a little bit as well. So businesses like IKEA, Decathlon, Uniqlo, they all do self-service, and many of them are doing it through RFID. Put your stuff in the bucket, and then you pay your bill and you don't have to scan anything. We'll spend a bit of time on RFID as well, but that has lots of other benefits as to reasons why they're doing it. Marketing, one of the big ways people are saving money here is to basically use loyalty programs. So instead of buying customers through paid media, they're using loyalty programs to basically re-engage their existing customers. And then the final one, on technology, we're seeing increase in SaaS. I won't spend long talking about it, but open banking is a really interesting one. So we're seeing a few businesses go, hang on a minute, our card fees are 1-2%. Actually, if we can get a quarter of our customers to use open banking, we can save, quarter of a percent on our total cost base. That's really, really huge. So a few businesses are starting to implement open banking as a payment method at checkout, which obviously is not very sexy to talk about, but actually I think we'll see more and more of that, because the potential cost saving is huge, right? Businesses are paying many, many millions in card transaction fees that they could avoid. And obviously it's more secure, less fraud with open banking as well. So we'll touch on these 6 areas very quickly, and then I'm going to spend most of the time talking about AI. So marketplace tech, almost every large business we work with now has got some sort of marketplace integration, because they can extend their range, avoid taking on risk. Here's an example from Kingfisher Group, B&Q. You can go and buy a ride on 1 mile from their website. Essentially it's going to be filled by Yard Force UK in this example. That's happening with basically all of the big retailers. Some of them are doing it through traditional dropship integrations. Others are acquiring complementary businesses, so buying a business and then using that as a method to get stock into their business. Some are doing like hybrid listings, partnerships, things like that. Drive for self-service, again, I think this one's pretty straightforward. We've touched on it. One extra dimension is that a lot of retailers are trying to get customers to use their own phone to do the scanning. Again, the obvious reason being, if I don't have to buy a till and buy all the technology in there if the customer's doing it, or I don't have to buy as many tills if the customer's doing the hard work of scanning on their phone. So that's something that I think we'll see increase. And the UK is definitely one of the highest adopters of both online sales, but also some of this technology like self-scan. RFID is a really interesting one. So there's a few businesses that invest in it early. So Fast Retailing, who own Uniqlo, is kind of one of the big businesses that put RFID throughout their business. And actually, as a business, they're killing it at the moment. And one of the reasons is they get all of these benefits, right? So stuff comes into the warehouse RFID tag, you know what's in the box, you know where it's going. You can pick things, you can do things like cycle counting in your warehouse. All of the costs of those things goes right down when you've got RFID. Stores can manage their inventory much better. You can scan locations and get all the products without having to go through manually and do it all. You know things like sizing, you avoid problems around like scanning wrong products. Obviously, you've got the bit that we all see as customers, which is the checkout, where you put your stuff in the Uniqlo bin and it just scans everything and says, are these the 7 items you've got? The big one that's being used for now is anti-theft. So obviously when it goes into the bin, gets scanned, you know that product has been paid for, so when it goes out the door, it's not going to beep. If you take a product out the door without putting it through that process, it'll beep because it knows it's stolen. So that kind of stuff is quite interesting. And again, like when you add in all these different benefits, the cost case, which is really significant for RFID, starts to add up. So the reason why it's not ubiquitous is the setup cost is huge, right? So trying to go and get a business to sign off a multi-year, multi-million pound bit of work is not an easy thing to do, and there's some risk in that. So a lot of businesses haven't done it, but certainly those that have are seeing the benefits of it. Obviously some customers still don't like self-serving, so they still get a bit frustrated by that. But there's huge benefit to this, and I think this is a trend that we'll see slowly tick up. And the reason it won't tick up faster is that cost investment piece. So this one is kind of interesting. So I was working with a business in Greece, and they have digital signage. So we see this sort of stuff around in the UK. But what they've also got is a camera in the digital signage, which is plugged into AI, which can work out whether a man or a woman is viewing it, what their age is, what their demographic is, and it can change the advert based on gender, essentially, is all they're doing, but they have other ways of doing more deep one-to-one personalisation. And the kind of thing it might be is, it's a man, it's Christmas gifts for her, it's a woman, it's Christmas gifts for him, that sort of thing. So we're seeing, perhaps not quite Blade Runner style advertising yet, but the technology is actually there to do one-to-one personalisation. So either through things like a loyalty app using beacons, working out it's Dan that's walking past, let's show Dan some personalised products. This again is moving a little bit slowly because there's privacy concerns around it, but the technology is there, so it's something that we'll see more of in the future. Loyalty is another big one, so we do quite a lot of work in the loyalty space. So we work with David Jones, we work with Selforganization, we have helped them develop their loyalty propositions. We're just seeing more and more of this kind of thing where people are getting really creative, partnering with other businesses, whether that's airlines, whether that's adjacent brands, to basically try and lock customers into their brand. That again is almost becoming ubiquitous. We're seeing all the big businesses going, I don't want to keep paying this chunk of money to Google to buy customers that might be my customers already, they just happen to be searching via Google. Let's try and get them apps, let's try and get them loyalty programs. This is somewhat tangential, but essentially this data looks at the top 100,000 websites in the world, so that there's always been a top 100,000 websites in this period of time, and it shows the e-commerce platform they're using. So obviously this is saying around 3,000 of the top 100,000 websites are using one of these e-commerce platforms. There's two ways you could look at this. You could say, well, there's more e-commerce businesses now than there were 5 years ago, which I think is definitely true. We're seeing more brands go direct to consumer, which again feeds into that increased competition. But they're also taking much cheaper platforms than we would normally see. So the likes of Shopify Plus, which was typically a small business platform, we're seeing really quite large businesses take it very seriously, partly because it's got very low license costs, it's quite quick to work with. So we're seeing really increased adoption of that kind of platform, and certainly a decline in some of these older platforms like Ecommerce Cloud, which probably isn't surprising. So now on to AI. Retail Week asked executives how they're using AI. This was their results. Knowing some of those executives, I know that they probably didn't have a clue how they're using AI, and therefore I would take this data very much with a pinch of salt. It's survey data, so you can't take it that seriously, and now every company has just added AI to their website because you have to, right? So whether it's actually AI or not is not necessarily accurate. But what I thought I would do is go through these different categories and share how we're seeing retailers use AI in these spaces. Customer experience is kind of the first one. So this is some work MINDERA did actually. Search for blue party dress, you get these dresses. You then add a search term which has not V-neck, and the AI knows that you want to remove all these low-cut necklines, and then gives you a selection that is not low-cut, essentially. So things like this, a sort of ChatGPT experience in search, are going to become more and more prevalent. So again, it's not there now. Certain businesses are dabbling with it, but I think we're going to see this expected from lots of users. And if users can't do it on your website, they're going to go to the AI tools like ChatGPT to let them do it. So I think that's something that we should see more and more businesses adopting, and it's actually quite easy to do. Like the tech behind this was, a small number of probably 1 or 2 months, if not a few weeks. Zalando have got a similar feature on their website at the moment. So this is just a chat I had with the Zalando bot. Basically, I wanted white t-shirts. Surprise! It gave me some white t-shirts. I was like, I don't want any logos on them. Now that's something that you can't usually search for on a website. You can't usually say I don't want logos because they haven't got data around that. So show me logo-free options. And they went, yeah, sure, and here are some without logos. So it's a bit of a contrived use case, but it is working and it is there, and that's in production. You can go and test it out. Ralph Lauren have one in their app as well. You can bother to download it and try it out, but it's relatively straightforward technology, which I think at the moment the experience is separated from their e-commerce, so you sort of end up going to this chatbot and then going back to their website. I think we'll see it embedded a little bit more in the future. And then you'll have all seen this agentic commerce protocol demo from ChatGPT probably, which is you go into ChatGPT and you say, hey, I want a gift under £100 ceramic. It then gives you some examples of what you could buy, and then it lets you buy them there because those businesses have integrated with ACP. Shopify, Etsy, they've already got ACP connectors, so you can kind of do this with those platforms. Obviously Shopify, we saw how many businesses are on Shopify before, so they'll all by default be able to sell to you in ChatGPT. I think this is interesting. I sort of have got a bit of a there's some clear pros to it, but there's some clear cons as well. So Meta had nothing to do with AI, but they had an in-app checkout process where brands that were listed in Facebook or whatever would let customers buy in Facebook without leaving Facebook. And obviously it was a bit of a disaster because buying products is quite complicated. There's a post-purchase experience, you might want to return it, you might have questions. If you bought it on ChatGPT or Facebook, how do you then navigate a problem with that product? And so they're finally gone, actually, you know what, we're going to sunset it because A, it's complicated, and B, we probably make more money by sending referrals over to you and giving us ad revenue than actually having to take a commission on that sale. So
Whether ChatGPT and OpenAI do a better job of that or not, I don't know, but I think that problem that Meta faced will also be faced by OpenAI and other people who try to do this. So that's the user experience. Our personalization is the other one. I think everyone's kind of aware that businesses personalize their website. AI helps you do it more effectively. I think the main watch out that I see here is businesses with really low average transactions a year. So like a lot of fashion businesses have like 1.6 transactions a year, and then they put personalization on their website, and then they're like, oh, why is it not working? Why is it not giving us an uplift in sales? And what if I told you that this person bought a t-shirt and a belt? What would you do with that to give them a really personal experience from our catalogue of 200,000 products? Not a lot. So AI is good, but it's not perfect. Personalization generally works better in grocery stores and grocery businesses where you've got 50 odd products being purchased every month. All of a sudden, very, very quickly, you can understand that customer, understand what they're interested in, and give a personalised experience. In the data space, so this is kind of a bit of an interesting one. So we actually used AI when we were working on the Selforganization loyalty program to help clean up their customer database. So any business that's got physical stores and online inevitably is going to get duplicate records, right? Someone's typed my name in at the till and they've typed it in wrong, or my wife's changed her name because she's got married now, so she's got a new email or whatever it might be. So you end up with all of this like proliferation of data for various reasons. Some businesses do it even worse because they make unique IDs based on weird things. But anyway, to clean that up can be quite hard because you've got hundreds of thousands of different millions of records. Again, AI is great at this sort of stuff. You can go through and be like, I'm 99% sure that all of these are duplicates. I'm 95% sure these are duplicates. I'm 80% sure. And you can decide where you want to draw that line. You might be like, you know what, we're going to auto-merge everything above 95, we're going to review everything 75 to 85, and we're not going to touch the other ones. And that was basically what we did with Selforganization to do that cleanup. So that's quite a good use case of sort of AI in the data science space. Marketing, I think everyone's kind of familiar with how you can use AI to power marketing. The obvious ones we see is like working out when best to send a push notification, when best to send an email to get a customer to open it, what products to recommend within that email. Those things are all now, that were done algorithmically are often done with algorithms plus a bit of AI to optimize those algorithms. In-store signage, so this is sort of an expansion of the point earlier really. So we're seeing businesses have in-store signage that can be sold retail media, it can be promoting their own products, it can be somewhere between the two, promoting in-store products that are not their own product. That is already there. I think what we're seeing is cameras with AI can do all kinds of stuff, like not just detect gender, but they could go as far as to detect style, detect the kind of products people are wearing, and therefore change what's being displayed based on the style of the person who is walking past the camera. Now, I think, again, this is going to move relatively slowly because there's a privacy element to it around how much users want that, but certainly basic personalization and promotion of signage is going to happen. Other things we're seeing businesses do are connecting their CCTV cameras that are already there, so not paying any money to install new ones, and getting them to then create heat maps of their store layout to work out actually where AI can look at all the CCTV footage and tell me where people are walking. So actually, if the product's not selling well, is it because it's in the wrong part of the store, or actually has it got enough footfall, it's just not a very good product? So that's one use case. Another one is another business use it to detect hazards, so looking at the aisles of a supermarket, detect spills, detect empty shelves, detect obstacles on the floor, that kind of thing. So again, we'll see AI doing these tasks that would be pretty unfeasible for traditional technology to do, and that's kind of interesting. Supply chains, things like pick optimization, route optimization for delivery drivers, that's all pretty standard now. Again, those traditional algorithms are now being enhanced with AI to basically kind of optimize them further, essentially. So in the supply chain side of things, AI can give good benefits. So HR, this is one we're working with a client on, so some people in the room will know this example. Basically taking a business's sort of training material, putting it into a chatbot, training that chatbot on the business's training material to then give it to staff to basically help them have conversations. So it's kind of a coaching tool. In this example, it might be like an individual who's a manager has got a hard conversation and wants some feedback on how to have that hard conversation. They don't necessarily want to talk to their manager about the fact they don't know how to have this conversation. So it's a way of helping training staff in a sort of confidential and private way. And you don't necessarily want your staff going to ChatGPT to get that advice because it's external. So this kind of thing, I think we'll see lots of businesses doing similar types of things to use AI to help staff. The other one we see a lot of is around recruitment. So almost all recruitment platforms now have an AI element that scores candidates that are coming in. as is the case with all these tools, you've got to kind of be a little bit careful because they can introduce bias into the process, but AI in HR is going to become more and more common. Then in terms of merchandising, unsurprisingly, AI can do a good job of merchandising. We see it in things like, again, this is one of our proof of concepts, you can give it a product and AI can use computer vision to better understand that product. So if you've got really bad metadata around the product, you might be like, it's a blue dress, and that might be all you have. Actually, AI can work out, okay, what's the length, what's the style of it. Now I'm going to go and find other products that are blue dresses in the same length, same style, that are similar. And this is a really good ROI driver for businesses because a lot of people come into a website through Google search and it might not be in their size, or it might have a weird cut down the side that they don't quite like, but they were sort of almost there, that's why they clicked on it. If you've got similar products, they'll then start engaging with those rather than going back to Google and having to buy again. This sort of thing, when we've seen businesses implement these features, the ROI is like, it's great. AI makes it much more affordable than it has done in the past. On the cybersecurity front, what the National Centre for Cybersecurity is saying is AI isn't necessarily creating new attack vectors, it's making the existing ones more effective, essentially. So what we see is things like voice phishing, phishing emails. Now, all of a sudden, people who were writing those manually, there'd be mistakes in there, could be spelling mistakes, could be grammar mistakes, could be context mistakes. AI fixes all of that instantly. So all of a sudden, a lot of these phishing messages are more convincing. Attackers are using it, and then people are also using it in a defensive way. So a few interesting things that we've seen are one business basically monitoring the dark web for messages. So a lot of people who attack businesses, they don't know each other in person, they chat online, and they are also mindful that they need to remain anonymous from each other. So they're not necessarily friends. You sort of have this view in your mind that it's a group of friends who are hacking a business, but actually they might not know each other's real names or addresses or where they live. And they're often using these dark web forums to chat about it because they're relatively anonymous. So what AI can do is go and scan those forums to basically work out, okay, what businesses are being talked about. If those businesses are being talked about and things like, hey, I've got access to so-and-so, it's a way for businesses to be able to identify that they are underactive or going to be under active attack relatively soon. So we're seeing that being quite good. Things like AI-powered security testing. So Ian and his team have got AI tools that can go and hack businesses essentially, which can find exploitations and basically help you fix them. And we're seeing most businesses that offer things like code analysis tool, fraud risk tools, they've all now got an AI element, which basically is taking their existing algorithms and validating them with AI or getting AI to enhance those existing methods and sort of give extra assurances. And then the final one is a few people have got AI agents that are doing autonomous defense, and not seeing that in the retail space. I think that's probably more in the government space at the moment, but I think that will come to retail, where again you sort of have an agent that's part of your cybersecurity team that can then be awake all night helping you detect and protect against that. And then the final one is things like helping you with development and innovation. So essentially we work with a business where we take all of their review data and use AI to summarise that review data to give back to staff. That used to be a manual process that would take hours and hours, if not weeks. Now AI can do it very quickly, and businesses like Amazon go one step further and do things like, we'll take that data and turn it into a summary that is then more useful. Like, people say these things, they say it's good quality, good value for money, but they're worried about the functionality, whatever it might be. Pricing is pretty different depending on the business. So things like airline prices will go up, things like fashion prices will go down. So in-season fashion, full price, 3 seasons old fashion, quite cheap. Airline, first seat on the plane, very cheap, last seat on the plane, very expensive. And almost all businesses tend to use some sort of step process where they're like, well, when we hit that mark, we'll put the price up. Obviously, when you add AI in, it can do a much more nuanced job of adjusting pricing, and that could be just for markdown, that could be always on pricing. You can do little dips, you can do little raises, little dips, and basically maximise either sell-through rate or maximise margin. So that's something that, again, we see quite a good return on investment from that kind of solution. The one watch out that can get you in trouble is EU has quite strict rules around what price you can show as a markdown. So if you had a price at X and marked it down to Y, and then you mark it down again, you can't show X, you have to show Y as the last price. So businesses can fall foul of that if they're not really clear about it. Product videos, so this is quite interesting. So Forever 21 are using, I'm pretty sure, AI to create this video, which is relatively compelling example of a runway. So I thought, well, what could I do to show how hard it is? So I took the most complicated dress I could think of, lots of patterns, tassels, etc. gave AI that prompt. It took a few goes, but actually, without any special tools, just using off-the-shelf tooling, you can get AI to create a semi-credible runway look of probably the most complicated product you can find. And I'm not skilled at any of this, and that's the prompt I got to. Originally, it was doing weird things like making the person walk into the camera. I was like, I don't want that. And so I had to sort of optimize for that. But actually, the ability to generate a video from an image is huge, right? I literally gave it that image and that prompt, and you end up with that video. So I think we'll see more of this kind of stuff around product enrichment and product enhancement, that kind of thing. That, again, if you're not paying attention to a few of the mistakes on the pattern, it's pretty compelling. You can also use it for things like retouching. So again, I took this image, gave it a prompt, got that image out. That was actually the original they took. So again, I perhaps gave it slightly the wrong shade of white, but that's a one prompt that just works straight away. Again, photo studios are really expensive parts of businesses. So I think we'll see AI basically enhancing or replacing certain photo studio parts. Again, another example, take a t-shirt, you say, hey, can you recolor it to be that? That was the original that they had on the website, these two here. That's the AI version. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Again, this is all like one-shot prompts, no special tooling, no special thought gone into it. It just like gets you quite far and quite close quite quickly. Then you've got MCP, which is Model Context Protocol. So this is where you can build apps within an AI agent like ChatGPT. This is happening in America at the moment. Basically, you do things like, in this example, create a playlist from Shopify. You could also do it things like, where should I go on holiday where the weather is X, Y, Z, or you can be like, what sort of bed should I buy given my requirements at ABC. There's a whole heap of different use cases you can use within MCP. And kind of the reason for doing this is AI is good, but it's not that good. So actually it'll make mistakes around factual information because it's pattern matching. So if you say I want to go on holiday where it's going to be sunny in the evenings, it can easily make a mistake around understanding what sunny in the evenings is. Whereas if it has a connection to a website that has that data objectively laid out in data files, then it won't make that mistake essentially. So MCP I think is going to be quite interesting for businesses. And now the final point is around software development. So this is some data from the DORA report. It sort of describes AI as an amplifier in software development. So essentially, whatever is there, AI will amplify it, the good and the bad. So you see things like increased instability when you're using AI, but actually also increased performance in almost all metrics, right? And some metrics like friction get reduced. So generally, every business we're working now is using AI in the software development process in some form or another. One of our observations is that it won't fix a bad software engineering development lifecycle. So you can't just slap AI onto the top of a bad process and expect it to fix it. It will just exaggerate what's there essentially. A really important point is you have to embed it in multiple parts of the process, otherwise you've got a pipeline, you optimize the development part, stuff will still bottleneck at the testing part or the release part or the product management part. So when we're working with companies to get AI embedded, we make sure that they've thought about all the different parts of the flow, because if you just stick it in one place, you won't get any increased throughput, you'll just have more frustration because now all of a sudden developers' code's backing up, but they've got a change approval board that happens every 2 weeks, so they can still only release every 2 weeks, and that still is then a bottleneck because they can't pump too much code into it. For whatever reason it might be, or the product management team is now stressed because developers are moving too fast, or testers are stressed because they haven't got AI tooling. So again, you have to sort of stick it in more parts of the process. This is not a great example, but basically, as many of you all know now, you can give Copilot in this example a request. So look, here's some legacy code. I forgot to sign in, I've signed in, that's fine. And it will just refactor that big chunk of code into a modern request. In this example, it's JavaScript, XML, HTTP request, which is kind of an old way of sending data back and forth over the internet. And it just turned it into a modern way, keeping all of the existing functionality of the code there in like 2 seconds. Now, a junior developer could do that in half an hour, a senior developer could do it in 15 minutes, ChatGPT can do it in 20 seconds, or 10 seconds, or whatever it is. So that's kind of interesting, and we're working with some clients to explore how far we can take it. That's the last slide. So we've got a business that's got a really old application written, unsupported technology, and Phil can tell you more about it if you're interested, but essentially they're saying, okay, well, could we rebuild the entire application from Xamarin into Kotlin in a really short space of time? It would take a team maybe 3 or 4 months, and the existing application's got no documentation, no unit test coverage. It's really critical to the business, so you kind of can't mess it up. That's a bit of a painful place to be because no one wants to spend 6 months potentially of the team's time getting from A to A, but on Kotlin instead of Xamarin, but Xamarin's out of support. And actually within a week, the team have got maybe like 70% of the way there to rebuilding it in Kotlin, with unit tests now, with documentation they didn't have before. So I think we'll see more interesting examples of AI being used for that sort of thing in the software development lifecycle, because it's very good when it's got the full picture. It's like, I know what this application code does because I can see all of the code. I'm not trying to guess what you want the code to do. I can see it all. I can turn it into a more modern version of the code. So I think that's a very good use case right now. So that is everything.